fourth generation were sunflower movement. You saw the clip in the opening video yesterday. I'm even prouder to be a professor outside of our Congress to support many of my students' occupation of the Congress to start a trade deal with China. So I would say that the legacy of these past experiences of resistance become Taiwan's rich democratic stock to build resilience and to foster a belief that democracy is the only game in town. I'm not sure what about the democracy stock in Ukraine, but I found that now the challenge for us is how to pass down these experiences. Many young people today grew up in a full democratic society. They don't have the first-hand experience of authoritarian rule. They don't understand the harm of autocracy. In their experiences, if a government doesn't do well, they just need to vote for another next time. But they didn't understand that some institutional changes can cause long-term and irreversible damage to Taiwan. The challenge become even more serious because what we face today is the CCP United Front tactic, include recruiting Taiwanese youth through cultural exchanges, financial incentives, and networking experiences. CCP worked very hard to attract young Taiwanese to study, work, and start a business in China, gradually integrating them into China's economy and eventually making them accept their political value. I'll give you an example. In Fujian, a province in southern China, there's an entrepreneurship program specifically for Taiwanese youth. It openly advertised grants of 8,000 to 30,000 US dollars for startups and investment funding of 30,000 to 60,000 USD dollars, all of which doesn't need to be paid back. These amounts are highly attractive to some young people in Taiwan. Therefore, I think, learning from Ukraine, what we think that, we have to work very hard to pass our experiences of fighting for democracy to the younger generation. And we also need to check the CCP's evolving tactics in order to counter and influence.
用不到就不对啊！如果突然出现，慢，这边也很多。认真，我让装量。
动作无快啊！我你在动作无快，甲蹲落去好啊。无伊动作无快啊，系啊，系啊，对啊，你看伊食西瓜。
对啊，现在差异都小，是吧？
第一个是小玉西瓜。First is good leadership, right? And I wanted to commend Mrs. Abe for your very moving remarks just now. I had the great privilege of knowing
也是啊，你拢无咧惊啊，我讲。
President Trump both in office. Abe Shinzo is a pretty excellent example of what exceptional leadership can do in terms of making democracy more resilient. His concept of free and open Indo-Pacific was actually adopted in the United States. Continued under the Biden administration. That language was used again just the other day when Japan's Prime Minister Ishima met with President Trump and recognized that that relationship is built on the foundation of what Prime Minister Abe was saying. So this is a moment where leadership really needs to step up in every country that cares about its freedom and its democracy. I think finally making some very good points about the types of tactics that the Chinese Communist Party uses, these so-called right? This United Front and what they're waging in Taiwan, but also in the other places, is what they call three warfares. Right? This idea that psychological warfare and on attacking people's thinking. And they have a lot of doctrine about this. They have a lot of practice trying to win people over through pushing narratives through social media in particular. A lot of this is done through amplifying certain narratives because they control the platforms to do that, which shame on all of our society. TikTok to take shame on us for allowing apps like Xiaohongshu. The thing is called the Red Book, and yet Americans and Taiwanese are adopting this so that Xi Jinping can control what they see and what they don't see. Shame on us for that. But I think that it is not the same as actual control. You can push back against these things. We have constitutional systems and laws. We have the ability to shed light on these things. And right now, the United States has a law that requires that TikTok, and probably this sets a precedent for other Chinese-controlled apps, to be shifted to American control, where they would actually be accountable under U.S. law and under U.S. ownership. God willing, the United States, the new administration will actually enforce the law that is required to enforce, and either enforce that transfer of ownership or ban the app outright.
You make a really good point about economic sovereignty, and here in Taiwan, there's a lot of conversations about the so-called red supply chain and the need to establish a democratic supply chain. Ambassador Lippert, if I can turn to you on that question and whether you're seeing an increasing bifurcation in the world when it comes to trade, and whether that's a positive thing, whether that will lead to better results, more economic sovereignty, or whether it might be headed in the wrong direction.
No, thanks. Great to be here, first of all. Second, I would just say I signed up for this board for a free hotel room in Halifax and some lobster, and all of a sudden I'm in Taipei on a panel, so it's a little cerebral. But on a serious note, I too want to associate myself with Matt's remarks on Ms. Abe's statement and your leadership of your husband. I too knew him well when I was in a senior position with the Pentagon, and his leadership on very difficult military issues really propelled the U.S.-Japan alliance to new heights and has put us in a position that we can at least effectuate a reasonable security policy in the Pacific going into the 21st century. So thank you for that. On the question at hand, maybe to take it just a slightly different direction, I do think that there are 4 to 10 core technologies, depending on how you define them, that are just critical for competitive advantage in the 21st century. We generally know what these are. They range from AI, quantum computing, biologics, semiconductors. There's a list there. And what I would say is I'm encouraged by the fact that several like-minded nations, not just in Asia, but also the Dutch as well, on the semiconductor front and other Europeans on other sensitive technologies like the Brits on AI, are starting, I think, that work of coming together and realizing the importance of maintaining a competitive edge or getting back to the commanding heights of competition or technology in certain areas where I think we are at risk of losing that advantage. I think that's one. 2, I think the second point is keeping secure the technology that you do have. And I think there is still a lot of work to be done, but I think foundational work, I think starting really in the Trump administration, continuing on through the Biden administration, I think that work needs to continue, and it's very important. And then finally, what I would say on the third piece in terms of the technological issues here is that the big advantage, and this is where I think the Trump administration has issues with allies. And I would also say sometimes it's of mixed minds, because I think if we go to the National Security Council staff, there are very traditional Republican hawks who strongly believe in the alliance system. I think there are other voices in the administration who take contrary views. And I think what I'm hoping is that in the Trump administration, the view that allies, friends, and partners issues, the value of those friends is underscored, harnessed, and basically calibrated to harness it, to use this great advantage that we do share. Let me just stop there.
Ambassador, I want to follow up a little bit on this topic. As we see the development of technologies kind of increasingly segregated, I wonder, do you think that conflict in the next, let's say, decade or near, medium term, more likely or less likely?
I mean, that is a huge geopolitical, sort of political science question, which I am utterly unequipped to answer. But what I would say is I do tend to believe that economic integration does help reduce conflict. That's, I think, point one. But I also think there's also sufficient evidence that there's sufficient evidence to indicate that there are limits to that economic integration. And where you draw certain lines, especially around core technologies, that could frankly, if commanding heights or commanding advantages were gained, would actually increase the propensity for conflict. So I think you have to strike the right balance. There's a baseline, I think, of thought that I tend to subscribe to, again, to repeat myself, that economic integration is helpful, but limits and a carefully calibrated policy to ensure that certain, I would say, I guess you could say, provocative technologies are here. I mean, we don't have any economic interdependence. I'll take a really extreme strawman example. We don't have economic interdependence and trade on nuclear weapons, right? For example, I mean, that's a complete strawman. But I think you can go down that continuum and argue that certain core technologies are critical. I guess I would say a dialing back of cooperation in those areas or curtailing it altogether is important. Final point, look, now you're into the question about once you get beyond those core technologies, how much tariffs, trade, supply chain, components, raw materials, I think that's a very important question that's ripe for discussion. I think it's contested terrain in terms of where we draw those lines and trying to draw those lines to maximize benefits and basically reduce risks over time.
Dr. Marco, much of the West has united in order to try to isolate Russia with sanctions and other economic measures. I'm wondering which kinds of sanctions you found to be most effective in helping aid Ukraine's democracy as it tries to resist Russia. There's been a lot of push on things like energy and particular machines, like CNC machines. I wonder, where do you kind of rank what's been effective in helping increase Ukraine's resilience from an economic perspective?
So, of course, sanctions are a very important instrument as a leverage. And, of course, we wish to see sanctions as a preventive mechanism before the war starts. But if you analyze 11 years of Russian ongoing aggression, so you could see that at the beginning, when Russia invaded Ukraine back in 2014, of course, we expected more tougher sanctions. And the weak side of sanctions is incrementalism. And I think this is how Russia is adjusting its economy, its banking system, its defense industry. The European Union adopted 16 packages of sanctions after the full-scale war. 16 packages. So, of course, we need to talk about synchronization of sanctions between the US, UK, European Union, G7 countries, and I'm really very thankful to Japan. And in 2016, during the visit of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to Kyiv, we met. Also, I at that time chaired the Foreign Relations Committee of the Ukrainian Parliament. So, and Japan here in this region always leading in economic measures against Russian Federation. So this is really important. But answering your question, during the Munich Security Conference, the first day the conference started, Russia attacked the nuclear stations in Ukraine. So why Rosatom never been sanctioned? This is the key question. So Russia is occupying the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, from the beginning of the full-scale war. So for all this period, we are advocating that sanctions against the biggest Russian monopolist, Rosatom, should be imposed, but it's not happening. So another example, it's energy. Why Russian LNG still at the European energy market? So now maybe Americans could sell more and replace Russia, and I don't know, but it's really important. Also, we've seen a lot of cases how Russia, and including China, already doing the subversive acts, attacking underwater cables in the Baltic Sea, which is the area of NATO and the EU countries. Baltic Sea, already many sabotage, many subversive acts happen, and the question is why the blockade of trade and these fleets with oil are still is not happening. So there are now, when Russia is really weak and their economy is facing problems, besides inflation, there are other problems. So when Russia is vulnerable, it's a moment to increase pressure, not to sign a better deal, but actually to do everything possible that Russia is defeated. This is my message, and this is what we expected from the new presidential administration of the United States, that like as a pre-negotiation period, we will see steps which will demonstrate strength of the United States and will send a clear message to Russia that when Russia is weak, when Russia is vulnerable, it's a time to increase pressure and actually to have full economic isolation. Instead, we see political a new reality, and when Russia is now is not the aggressor state anymore. You've seen this news coming that in G7 statement, there's one member who is saying that Russia, let's not use the name Russia as the aggressor. And it seems like the United States will not support Ukraine resolution for the third anniversary of the full-scale war, also because Russia is the aggressor state. So besides sanctions, there are other ways how to increase pressure on Russia. But the question is first, are we ready? Is there a political will to defeat Russia? Because by defeating Russia, I mean not just justice, not just punishment for the genociders, but also it's when the Soviet Union collapsed, this was the end of the communist ideology, but not the end of Russian imperialism. So we need to be very clear that Russia is not alone. China and Russia, they have their strategic alliance. And of course now China is trying to play a positive role, saying that, okay, if America is withdrawing from Europe, we are ready to help. We can provide security guarantees. Because for the main question for Ukraine right now, how to end the war, it's about security guarantees. 64% of our population think that we cannot start negotiations without knowing what are the security guarantees. And next week, the Prime Minister of UK and President of France, Macron, will be in Washington, D.C., so I hope they will try to keep these transatlantic ties, also explaining United States that the strength of the U.S. is in these alliances. Besides NATO, it's with Europe, and how U.S. is going to deter China in this region without success stories in the European continent. So this is very important to explain this and not to allow Russia to trap our partners in their quick solving the issue. And as we mentioned, the first question was about elections in Ukraine. Another, this is my advice to Taiwanese friends, because Russia wants to push Ukraine for elections also from the reason that pro-Russian politicians will be re-elected. So these guys who are working for Russian interests, being the members of Ukrainian parliament, who betrayed Ukraine. So then we could imagine that Russia will insist that free and fair elections require all politicians to participate, including collaborators and including all pro-Russian forces. This is another way how to destroy Ukraine from within, and all these hybrid warfare instruments to engage their fifth column or their representatives actually with the pro-Russian narratives and all this stuff, which is really very dangerous. And yesterday when Joseph Wu, Secretary General, mentioned that he hoped that 3% of GDP, this decision will be supported in the parliament here. So I think it's really important because I'm coming here to Taiwan after the Munich Security Conference, and this year they produced like a book with all selected speeches in the Munich Security Conference. And I was surprised seeing the speech from last year by current Vice President Vance, who was calling last year to the Europeans asking for 2% of GDP. So my advice to Taiwanese here, please build a coalition, talk to your society, because the more you invest now in your strengths, the better your chances to deter, to prevent, and actually to defend yourself from different type of attacks from Chinese side.
Maybe we can turn to you on that. Looking at what's been happening in the Taiwanese legislature, it seemed a little chaotic, a little messy. That's the nature of democracy and the take. I'm wondering if you can give us an update on kind of where the legislature, how the legislature is operating as a member of that body, and where you see the government moving forward when it comes to defense spending and defense priorities.
Yeah, I must say that, since I'm a legislator from DPP, I'm totally for, to invest more in our defense, especially in terms of the budget, right? Because that's the measurable investment that Trump or other allies, can count on for. But now our issue is that our opposition party, they might not think so, So our problem is that how to convince them. But, they will say that, look at the budget cut from last year, we didn't cut that much. I'm not sure whether you are aware that, actually, the DPP administration this term faced the historically highest budget cut from our Congress. And I'm sorry that the DPP is not the majority, so we try very hard to do that. But actually, through the political caucus negotiation, they didn't want to have any discussion. So now, what should we do? As far as I understand, our administration, they want to send back, the budget to the Congress for a reconsideration. And, if the Congress fail to do that, they might apply for a constitutional explanation. Okay. But now I want to tell you that, at least, we have a very strong civil society. That's also another point, the power of youth. As you can see that the Sunflower Movement led by the young people. And last year, we have a movement called the Bluebird Movement, actually led by the young people, but it's more cross-generational. So what is that about? They came to surround, came to block our, didn't really block, but, outside of our Congress, because, they want to demand more democratic discussion within the Congress. Because from my perspective, our opposition party, they went through, certain unconstitutional legal amendment in order to expand the power of the Congress. So it's already unconstitutional. Even more serious problem, without any substantial discussion within the committee, Congress, So I think it's very important for certain opposition party legislators. They might, feel a little hesitant, So, okay, that's the first round. Now the second round, they witness, the young people or the whole civil society witness another round of, political wrongdoing in our Congress, the so-called budget cut. It's really, the budget cut is reasonable if you have certain legitimate reasons, right? But if you don't get their proposal, just no, reasonable and no legitimate reasoning. Okay, so this now there has been a so-called mass recall campaign happening in Taiwan right now, and I will see that as a continuation of the Uber movement from last year. So I would say that, hopefully, maybe the KMT might, if their elected legislature face the pressure to be recalled successfully, maybe the KMT might change their caucus whip. From my perspective, John and Dr. talk about there are some politicians in Ukraine, they are supported by Russia, right? I will argue that some politicians within the KMT, they might support it by Beijing government. Okay, so if they change, the KMT change the whip of the caucus, we might have another chance. So now, last night I went to another gathering of my colleague at National Taiwan University. The only question they asked about, how about the mass recall campaign, whether we can succeed to, recall some of the KMT legislators, because the differences between the DPP legislators and the KMT legislators are the 6 legislators, number 6. In total, we have 113 legislators in our Congress. So that's the political campaign mobilized and initiated by the civil society. That's what I'm saying. Taiwan, luckily, we have quite a strong and vibrant civil society.
Mr. Bonner, just a quick question to you, and then we're going to turn to audience questions. We spoke a little bit about how democracies have this kind of advantage when it comes to free societies being able to innovate and create new products, new ideas. And yet in some of these very specific areas that Ambassador Lippert mentioned, in things like quantum computing and AI, it seems like the autocrats of the world have been able to find certain edges which impede against democratic societies. How do you account for that, and what are ways in which the free world can push back against some of those advantages?
Well, first, I just wanted to say that this budget that we're talking about in Taiwan is really important. This is a special budget that President William Lai proposed over the weekend. It's would bring Taiwan up to above 3% of GDP. That's where the United States is, and the United States needs to move higher from there, and Taiwan does as well. But it's really important as a signal to the United States and to other countries about Taiwan's commitment to its own defense. So I'm really hopeful that legislators across whatever party they're part of, they look at that as something that's an obvious and good investment. 3% of GDP, by the way, is cheap. Let's face it, right? To be able to deter the kind of conflict that Ukrainians are bravely fighting right now. They're fighting for their lives, fighting for their sovereignty. The 3-year anniversary of the full-scale invasion is, I think, on Monday. From what I've read, Ukraine is spending 37% of its GDP on defense right now. So 3% seems like a pretty good bargain, right? Seems like a good bargain to me. The United States, at the peak of the Cold War, was spending, during the 1980s, the Reagan administration was spending 6.8% of GDP, more than double what the United States spends right now. So that just puts things into perspective, and that seemed to work pretty well. It kept the Cold War cold. That's how we like wars, cold rather than hot. If you have to have a war, make it a cold one. Now, the reason that some of these, especially Beijing, has managed to find an edge in key technologies, there's several factors here, some of which we don't have control over, some of which we do. Number one is that there has been massive investment by the Chinese regime into trying to dominate these sectors and into placing people in a position where they can extract knowledge from the United States and other advanced economies, bring that back, and put it in service to the motherland. They even have a policy called military-civil fusion, right? That basically the military interests of the Chinese Communist Party are the guiding principle for the broader economy. So so-called civilian enterprises have to serve those ends. The reason that China's economy is doing so badly in general is because Xi Jinping is building a wartime economy so that he can either coerce or actually apply force, go to war against Taiwan, and then from Taiwan to other places as well. So all of the focus right now of the Chinese Communist regime is on the military-industrial base. China also has excellent engineers. It's a credit to China that they educate people to be able to be effective in these areas. There's a lesson for all of us in that, I think. But the opportunity now, if you look at the People's Republic of China, this one economy, and then you look at the dilapidated economy of Russia, the laughable petro-state of Iran, the virtually starving state of North Korea, together they are not that formidable if we start to look at our own alliance structure as a counterpart to this axis. The United States and its allies, its defense treaty allies, are about 3 times the GDP of the Axis powers, including China, combined. So that means that we've got 3 times as much economic power to invest in our defense, to defeat aggressors like Vladimir Putin, to deter aggressors like Xi Jinping, so that he doesn't gamble on a war here, but also to invest in our industrial base, and that should be an industrial base that's mutually self-supporting. Over the last few days of meetings I've had with government officials here in Taiwan, people have used this phrase, non-red supply chains. That's a pretty good phrase. We don't want to rely on China. Red supply chains for drone manufacturing and the components that go into that. Taiwan has immense things to offer as a defense industrial base contributor to free world countries that are friendly, like Ukraine, the United States, Japan, and elsewhere.
Well, I want to turn to the audience for some questions here. Right here in the second row.
Thank you. Very interesting set of presentations. Thanks very much. I have a question for Ms. Fan. I'm really interested in the mood among legislators in the LY right now in light of what President Trump and members of his administration have been doing and saying over the last few weeks. We heard from President Y and Joseph Wu yesterday, but what is the discussion and thinking in the legislature, among legislators, in response to Trump's statement that Zelensky is a dictator, that Ukraine started the war, Trump administration lending support for extreme right-wing parties in Europe, its threat to inflict serious economic damage on its closest allies, and even to absorb them into American territory?
Sorry, let's have a quick answer and then we'll go to you.
Only, represent my party members, in the Congress. I think for the to take Taiwan by force. And now there's another thing that to get Taiwanese people are even more cheaper than buying Taiwan. So for us, how to win back the majority of the Congress is our, urgent task. The so-called mass recall movement is very important. So for the DPP legislators, actually we received the, briefing from the world, from our headquarters, every week to, keep us aware of what's happening in the world. But I'm not sure about the KMT legislators and the TPP and other opposition party legislators. I think some of them might worry about, what's happening in their electoral district, because they were facing serious, recruit movement against them. I think it's hard for elected legislators to see like more than 10,000 voters came out. Actually, in Taipei district, for example, in Nanda, the legislature has facing, the petition collected more than 10,000 voters. And I think she got more than like 10,000, like 90,000 voters to win that electoral district. So for them, it's very important for them to go back to their electoral district to do the work in order to, to avoid to be recalled. Okay, so that's what their work might be. Okay.
A question from the center.
Lobsang Sengye, former president of the Tibetan government. And my question is to the panel, particularly Matt, good to see you. We all say that West is not doing enough for Ukraine to win the war. But after going to Ukraine, I also realized the Chinese strategy seems to be not to do enough for Russia to win the war, but to prolong the war, thereby weaken Russia economically and drain Russia, make them a junior partner, and then drain NATO and Europe, and drain also America, at least arms and ammunition, thereby deny Taiwan all the arms that America is supposed to give or sell. So China is killing 4 birds with 1 stone. Now, with this talk about trying to end the war in Ukraine, we all want sovereignty and security of Ukraine provided. By ending the war, some of the Republican Party are saying that we want to bring troops to Asia, thereby deter China from invading Taiwan. Is that true? If it's so, will it help Taiwan?
Mr. Barnes, do you want a quick response to that, and then we'll go to Mr. Kay.
I'll say good to see you. Look, I think from Beijing's standpoint, the best outcome would be for Vladimir Putin to steamroll Ukraine and control it in its entirety. That's why Xi Jinping, I think that's what he was expecting when he signed his No Limits Act in February of 2022 at the Winter Olympics with Vladimir Putin. And the war didn't go well. The worst outcome for Xi Jinping is that Ukraine defeats these aggressors. And I suspect that the premise of your question is right, that failing a outright victory in either direction, Xi Jinping probably wants to see a prolonged war. So I think everyone in this room would like to see the war come to an end, but it's got to be on terms that are acceptable to the Ukrainian people and its elected government. Think of the sacrifice that's been made to defend sovereignty, right? Why give up at a negotiating table what Ukraine's been able to defend on the battlefield? So I think that a honorable peace that provides for the security of Ukraine sustainably over time would be a good outcome. I just don't think that Vladimir Putin is interested in that right now. That's my estimation of him right now. He needs to lose even worse, I think, before he's going to be willing to do that. But we'll find out. It's fine to sort of test his bottom line a little bit. We shouldn't give
用你
anything
的包
away.
穿还是用我的包穿？
我的，
你的可以断吗？
可以，
确定哦。
可以，就是在里面用，就直接来就好。
Is there a fear that China,
我在家里收。
在哪里？这样子，这样就可以。
可以站的。
站镜头吧。
I'm Angela from M News Media. Yeah, we can go somewhere, Angela. Yeah, nice to meet you. So nice to meet you. All of our audience love you very much. So it's really fun. 好 ，OK， 好，我们用中文。It's okay. もうそんなに話すことはないので。
没有讲话的话。
OK， 我们好奇，可不可以就今天那个安倍夫人好像身上有一个特别的别针，可以帮我们介绍一下吗？
ここにタピオカミルクティーのバッジがありますけど、これ何の意味があるんですか？
これはハリファックスの会議のスピーカースピーカーに配られている今回の会議のための、バッジで、今回台湾なのでこのバッジになったようです。カナダで開催されるときはロブスターだと聞きました。
安倍夫人最近来台湾大概有3次，那每次来台湾有没有因为知道您其实蛮多公务行程，会不会有想要去哪些景点走走？
ここ最近では3回目というふうにしてますけれども、いつもなんかお仕事ご公務が多いばっかりだと思いますが、何かここ行きたいな、ここ行ってみたいなっていうようなことありますか？
まだ台湾がどういうところがあるのかよくわからないですけれども、去年は主人の銅像がある、高雄と、就任式の来清徳総統の就任式で台南の方にも行かせていただいたので、その他の地域にも、ぜひ、今年はまた4月6月にも、台湾に来る予定があるので、いろんなところをこれから訪問したいと思います。
前年去过他的先生的同乡游的高雄，然后赖总统九日典礼的时候去过台南，所以应该有很多别的很好的地方吧。所以以后啊4月6月也会来，所以那时候想要找机会更多的地方。
いいところがありますか？おすすめのところがありますか？
安倍夫人喜欢吃什么喝什么吗？我可以列一个清单给你。
お好きなもの食べ物とかあればもうリストにしてお出ししますか？
中華料理って台湾料理は大変日本人の口に合うので、何を食べても美味しいと思いますし、特にマンゴーが去年はすごくシーズンだったこともあり、台南で日本では食べられないようなたくさんの種類のマンゴーが大変美味しかったです。台南で食べました。はい。
台湾菜是对日本人绝对的味道风味啊，这很欢喜。然后去年去台南的时候， 日本应该吃不到的那个很多种类的芒果，所以而且那个大概5月就是那个刚好是这个季节，所以想要吃带来吃芒果，好吃的芒果。
安倍夫人以前有跟先生来过台湾，还记不记得当时你们一起去了哪里？
以前ご主人と一緒に昔台湾に来られたっていうふうに聞いたことがありますけれども、その時どこへ行かれたか覚えていますか？
台北だけだったと思いますけれども、多分丸山飯店に泊まったんだと思います。だから本当に30年ぐらい前のことで、よく覚えていないんですけれども、お食事が美味しかったことだけ覚えています。
大概30年前的事情，所以没有记得很清楚了。我记得那个住盐商饭店，然后吃的东西都好吃，那个是很好的回忆。
安倍夫人刚刚在演讲的时候有提到，就是川普是一个很善良的人，就是因为我们很少人可以有机会跟他直接的互动，那大家会觉得说他人高马大，好像对他有点惧怕。不过在您看来，川普是怎么样的领导人？
もし嫌だったらお答えにならなくていいんですけど、さっきトランプさんは善良な人だっていうふうにおっしゃってましたが、直接お会いしてお話ししたりする人は少ないので、多くの人はなんか怖そうな人だと思うんですけど、その印象みたいなのをちょっと。
そうですね。私は政治的なお話をしているわけではないので、非常に優しい、普段はメラニア夫人にもとても優しいご夫妻大変仲いいですし、そういう意味では優しい男性だというふうに私は思いますけれども、政治的那ことになると厳しい面はもちろんあると思いますが。
我们聊天的时候没有提到那个政治方面的事情，因为我看到那个他们川普夫妻的时候，因为他们夫妻也挺相处，然后川普本人也蛮温柔的，所以当然那个政治方面，他的工作方面有的部分比较严格，就是他看到的那个川普的很温柔的。
那因为等一下您就要见赖总统了，会有什么话想要特别跟他说吗？
この後赖総統にお会いになるというふうに承知しておりますけれども、どんなお話をされるか、もしお話になれるんでしたら教えていただけますか？
主人が亡くなった後も、大変、家まで来ていただいて弔意を示していただいたり、また就任式にも参加させていただいたり何度もお会いしているので、今回また台湾に来てハリファックスのこの会議に出席しましたという報告とご挨拶という感じだと思います。
安倍首相离开我们的时候，赖总那个时候副总统他特别跑来日本拜访他们，所以他也参加过那个总统的就职典礼，所以他这一次来台湾出席那个 Hfx 那个报告跟要表达谢谢。
如果要用一个食物，因为台湾跟日本都是这个美食大国，来形容台日关系，您会挑哪一个食物？
好難的問題で、日本も台湾も美食、美味しいものがいっぱいある国ですけれども、日台関係を食べ物に例えたら何だと思いますか？
日台関係を何でしょう。すごい難しいそうね。
Bubble tea, it's sweet tea.
タピオカミルクティーはでも台湾のものですかね。思いつかないですけど、なんでしょう。
那我们就是因为大家都会说您这个是就是这个石破茂首相在去见川普之前，你有给他很多好的建议，或是这个方向，或是帮他先打过招呼。那在上一次您跟川普见面的时候，有没有谈到台湾？
ちょっとこれは詳しく言ってみますか。トランプさんと お会いした時、台湾の話は
まあ、興味は示されていたと思いますが、私はちょっとそのお話には入ってないので。
看起来有关心，只是没有提到特别的。时间差不多。
好，
谢谢安倍夫人，谢谢，非常谢谢。
奥様ありがとうございます。
難しい質問されました。
结果呢，站着坐着，ここ静かだから在哪里？
好像身上有一个特别的别针，可以帮我们介绍一下。
ここにタピオカミルクティーのバッジがありますけれど、これ何の意味があるんですか？
これはファリファックスの会議のスピーカー、スピーカーに配られている今回の会議のためのなのでこのバッジになったようです。
安倍夫人最近来台湾大概有3次，那每次来台湾有没有因为知道
だと思いますが、何かここ行きたいな、ここ行ってみたいなっていうのはありますか？
まだ台湾がどういうところがあるのかよくわからないですけれども、去年は主人の銅像がある、高尾と、就任式の来清徳総統の就任式で台南の方にも行かせていただいたので、その方も
安倍夫人喜欢吃什么喝什么吗？我可以列一个清单给你。
お好きなもの、食べ物とかあればもうリストにしてお出ししますから。
中華料理っていう台湾料理は大変日本人の口に合うので、何を食べても美味しいと思いますし、特にマンゴーが去年はすごくシーズンだったこともあり。
人生玩过台湾，还记不记得当时你们一起去了哪里？
以前ご主人と一緒に昔台湾に来られたっていうことがありますけれども、その時どこへ行かれたか
台北だけだったと思いますけれども、多分丸山飯店に泊まったんだと思います。だから本当に30年ぐらい前のことで、よく覚えていないんですけれども、お食事が美味しかったことだけ覚えています。
長い方をお答えしたと思うんですけども、さっきトランプさんは善良な人だっていうふうにおっしゃってましたが、直接お会いして話したりする人は少ないので、多くの人はなんか怖そうな人だと思うんですけど、その印象みたいな。
そうですね。私は政治的なお話をしているわけではないので、非常に優しい。
どんなお話をされているか、もしお話大変でしたら教えていただけますか。
また台湾に来てハリファックスの、この会議に、僕とご挨拶という感じだと思います。
安倍首相过总统的就职典礼，所以他好な問題。日本も台湾も美食美味しいものがいっぱいある国ですけれど。
日台関係を何でしょう、すごい難しい質問ね。タピオカミルクティーはでも台湾のものですかね。
他准备要传安倍昭惠的原话。
NGV 谢谢，4号帮那个帮我切一下，安倍夫人专访，对，访问，哦，感谢你。不用，就这样。那我跟张明讲一下。好，谢谢。好，拜拜，感谢您。
安倍昭惠。安倍昭惠是前两年被枪杀的。安倍夫人吗？对，昭是昭，然后惠是恩惠的惠。听上了吗？
自从他叫我走，叫我干你老师，我给住了，干你！好像没有到，好像有到，不管我先抽靠背，我等他确定了，你看他小叫我撤，是啊。老曹最近做不好的干，问题是老曹的新闻是不好的，不是吗？是啊。对啊。我就搞不懂为什么不做啊？对啊。我先跟他确定，我等他回我，我就搞到后面靠腰。河马。
不要。曹兴诚来。
啊，曹来了。啊，你的麦不用拿吗？哦，好。